CNW Caboose alternator. It shows the alternator field terminal, which goes to the battery power terminal. The AC output terminals are right here on the top portion of this. The negative, positive, the regulator, the field alternator terminal. Battery power terminal, negative, positive, your AC output terminals, A field terminal. Alright, AC means alternating current through that flows in the one direction that reverses itself during each cycle lie on a sin wave. Alternation, the positive and negative half of the sin wave. Alternator, generator, the U of the motor vehicle charging system which provides high output and low cut in operation. Ampere, the unit of specifying a specific amount of the current flow in a circuit that is given in the time interval. The current is amperes measured with an ammeter. Armature, the portion of the generator which contains the current generator windings. DC generator, rotating armature. AC stator. Atom, foundation building block of the substance found in nature, composed of the nucleus, protons, and neutrons, encircled with the orbiting electrons. Auxiliary, the supply and sense of the point with the voltage regulator of the alternating system, U with the isolation diode. Battery, the power source of the supply of the DC power directly through the chemical action brush that makes the connection with the rotating component with the electrical generator, i.e. slipping rings, and the alternator generator communicator in the DC generator. The capacitor, electrical component of the connection with the alternator output terminal to suppress interface to a radio reception. Circuit, a complete path of support with the current flow consisting of the source of load. A coil, also referred to as inductor, winding and consisting of the many turns of wire, rotor, or stator coils. Commutators, segmented contactor on an armature of the DC generator which provides mechanical rectification, also supply the output of power. Conductor, material that offers very low opposition for the flow of electrical current. DC, the direct current for the flow of the constantly same direction. DC generator, the type of the ports of the power source, formerly used for the charging system, limited low speed, maximum output, characteristic delta. Type of the stator connection used in alternators. The system is the symbol is that for this is 0, represents the actual connections. Diode, the semiconductor device which passes the current one direction only with the proper voltage polarity across the form of electrical switch, is referred to as a rectifier. Diode, trio, same as the field diode. Eddy currents, losses induced by the stator core during the varying magnifying field with appropriate with a heater with a loss for the minimized while eliminating the stator core assembly. Efficiency, expressed for the amount of the output power of watts obtained with a given amount of the input drive power with the horsepower efficiently used with the stator present. Electromagnetic, winding with around with a coil with exhibit the strong magnetic field with excited with the electrical current. Electromagnetic induction, voltage generated with the conductor of the coil when cutting across the lines with magnetic force that forms the basic operation principle of electrical generators. Electron, negatively charged particle in an atom which constitutes the flow of electrical current. Excitation applied with the current with the rotor circuit with the alternator developing the output charge of the fan. Item mount with the alternator for the cooling process unit may be directional depending on application. Field alternator, winding used generated with a magnetic field within the generator. The stationary membrane and an alternator. Field diode, a smaller version insulated with a rectifier diode set with a supply with the field current with the alternator producing output power with the system also allows use of the charge indicator lamp circuit. The flux, the lines of magnetic force surrounding the poles of the magnetic electromagnetic generator. A unit G for the converting the mechanical energy and electronic energy. Del generators contained with the stationary rotating components that produce an output of electromagnetic inducing principle. Ground, common connection with the point of the charging system to which one side of the electrical system alternator battery is returned. Hertz, the unit which is expressed with the number of the cycles per second with the CPS and the AC wave, the alternate current waveform frequency. Horsepower, the term of the mechanical power which is equivalent to 746 watts of electrical power. Hysteresis, loss due to the material used in the stator assembly which tends to opposite with the magnetic change of the loss for the reduced additional cyclone of the materials. Indicator light, visual indicator used to monitor operational condition of the charging system. Indicator same as the coil in installation diode, a diode connected with the series alternator output circuit which provide with the voltage sense of the point of the regulator indicator lamp circuits. Insulator, materials that are which offer very high opposition resistance and flow of electron current. Lamination layers, sheath of materials used for the construction of the stator assembly to minimize the effects of eddy current loss. Magnetic materials exhibit the magnetic field that track the substance containing iron magnetic field field, same as flux. Neutron, particularly in the core of the atom that contains no electrical charge. Alright, negative, the polarity power circuit with the negative terminal battery alternator off with the charge of the atomic particle of such electron. Open circuit with the term used to describe the condition of the electronic circuit Electrical circuit resulting from the break of the opening within the circle of the phase refers to the number of the windings viewed in the stator assembly. The alternator, the three-phase machine, the three-stator windings are spaced 120 degrees equal apart. Permanent magnetic substance with the containing permanently magnetic properties opposed to the electromagnetics. The polarity of the polar surface is such that positive terminal battery alternator also charged with the atomic particle as such a proton. Potential, the pressure voltage existing in the electrical circuit, proton, the particle in the common core of the atom containing with a positive electrical charge, rectification process with the convert to the AC power to DC, mechanical communicator, electrogalonic diode, mean with the half of the wave of the rectifier process with the half of the power output sin wave, the full wave sin system utilize the total power of the system with the sin wave rectifier diode, semiconductor component with the rectifier circuit with the converter, AC to DC, also refers to diode, regulator, load conditions device used with the charging system, maintain constant with system voltages, vehicle speeds with the load conditions, relay electromechanical component used to supply excitation current with the alternator sleeve in the positive ground application, residual magnetism, amount of magnetic force remaining in the material after the exciting current is removed, resistance, the amount of the opposition referred with the current flow over the electrical current, the resistance specified in ohms, or it can be measured with the ohmmeter, a resistor, electrical opponent with limits with the amount of the current ampered with the circuit having the Lagrange given voltage resistor, and then commonly used with the alternator system to supply initial excitation. Rotor, rotating member in an alternator field, RPM, all the abbreviation for revolutions per minute, short circuit, circuit condition which the current bypasses load due to the existence of low resistance, short path, or sin wave, and alternating current waveform voltage current, typically used for the commercial power system, slip ring, and item mounted on the rotor, which allows the excitation current to pass through the rotor. View of the brushes assembly, also referred to as the collector ring star. The type of the stator connection used with the three-phase alternator, which one end of each of the winding is tied together, also known as the Y or the Y connection. Or the stationary winding in an alternator which supplied with the output power and the armature, three-phase full wave rectifier system, bridge rectifier circuit with the process of the both half of the outputs for each of the three-phase volt of the unit electrical pressure for the voltage, abbreviation V for the amount of voltage in the circuit that can be measured in the voltmeter, a winding a coil inductor containing the turns of the wire and an iron core stator. Y same as the same as star and Y connection, and Y is same as star and Y connection. Alright, once again, the battery has a positive and negative with small dashes in between long dashes. Resistor is a regular zigzag, and a coil is a curly loop. So capacitor is a break in a line with two parallel perpendicular lines. Diode reflector is a full-filled what looks like a pothead, what is also called the rectifier. A diode is a filled-in arrow with a dash on at the point of the arrow. Adjuster is an arrow pointing at a resistor. A switch is a break with an arrow in it. An indicating lamp shows a circle with one current loop in it. AC motor shows a circle with AC in it, and DC motor shows a DC generator with a DC in it. Fuse is a wave line, and a ground is a triangle pyramid dashed line. No circuit is a curl over a curl over the perpendicular line, and a regular perpendicular line, or a regular perpendicular line. Circuit cross is also a cross where the circuit connection is filled with a perpendicular datum filled in. Alright, voltage regulator. The voltage regulator, electronic switching device, the regulator sensitive with the voltage appearing with the alternator regulator, auxiliary terminal supply with the necessary field current with the maintaining system voltage, and alternator output terminal. The zero diode terminal stator incorporated with the voltage regulator circuit with allowing the resistors and two switches with transistor for the diode voltage sensor. Sensitive component with a thermosistor sensor to adjust the zero action suit with the regulator ambient temperatures. Consider the voltage regulator having two basic circuits, the load circuit with the control circuit. The load circuit shown in the figure 16 U for the positive negative power, positive switching transistor circuit with a small emitter resisting placing circuit protecting the transistor control with the current input to the output provided with the base element of the transistor negative with respect to the input with the emitter or element to turn on the switch. Transistor will not conduct when the negative energy on the base element is made of less negative. The base element currently is only a fraction of the load current with the emulator collector. The controller circuit over the regulator circuit with the switch of the base for the element with the dower output transistor for the full negative or to the less negative, thereby controlling the high current flow through the output transistor, then used to energize the alternate field with the rotary winding. Figure 17 shows a which looks like a capacitor. with a base and collector and transmitter, collector, transmitter, input going in, and then transistor deferrates the turn. Transistor will not conduct, base element becomes less negative. This is your transistors, positive, negative, base collector, negative, transistor. Some of the words are brushed out here, but I'm going to try to do this. If the transistor runs through the under these two fuses with a coil inductor running from positive negative battery to a motor alternator having its a figure 18 schematic drawing adjustable voltage regulator K for the TV, AC for the wherever the circuit control circuit for the component for the head, the load circuit for the illustrates how the regulator operates, the positive energy for the vehicle ignition switch for the initial excitation connected to the regular input put. Leave the several paths open for the energy grid flow for the occur with the path for the leads for the resistance of the base element output for transistor negative so for the transistor provides the circuit with the minimum resistance measurement between the input and output leads the circuit energy of the alternator field winding with the rotor when the engine feels. When the engine turns with the alternator with the magnetize the rotor with the alternating current with the developing the state with the rectifier to convert to the alternating current with the energy to direct the current with the voltage system voltage starts to rise. The alternator auxiliary terminal is also connected with the regulator input lead with the shown in figure 17 sensor for the rising the voltage inside of the control circuit with the regulator, especially with the zero die with the subject of the voltage chain with the voltage reach with the operating of the point with the zero denied the zener will conduct with the cause of the driver's transit conduct. The collector of the driver transistor connected with the base element output transistor less negative energy caused the output transistor turn off and stop conducting the magnetic field of the rotor winding of the starts to collapse. The system voltage starts to drop as declining voltage drop at the zero outputting with the zero stop the conducting the driver the transistor conducting the output transistor retaining the negative base of the potential starts the conducting again and energize the field winding with the figure 19 switch complying with the curve at the several thousand times of the maintains the good voltage level. Alright, this shows the red lead input, the green lead output, and the black being the ground negative. You see the capacitor, another smaller transistor negative, the transistor, some coil windings, which are some of alright, they're inductors. There's a lot of inductors on this one. Inductors going, and then another inductor going through figure 18 schematic drawing of the regulator control of load circuit. The thermistor resistance will verify the change of the temperature, verify allowing slightly higher charging rates and colder weather, lower charging voltage, and hot weather. The regulator black leads that serves only the ground regulator. Metal regulator body is not part of the electrical circuit. The regulator is manufactured fixed voltage epoxy encapsulated units shown in figure 1D and 1E. Alright, also adjustable volt regulators, figure 1D usually provides two adjustable voltage features, coarse adjustment, movable link located at the bottom of the regulator adjustment with a penometer under the regulator covered. The recommended procedure for setting adjustment regulators cover the test procedure section with its manual. Alright, you have your excitation resistor, your regulator, and then your excitation resistor, a regulator field, auxiliary, negative, also your off and on switch between the, transistors. Figure 20 shows the thermometer resistance characteristic of the thermistor. Alright, this shows the, let's see if we can't get closer to this. Shunt lead insulator lights with the OD slip rings, brush assembly, regulator brush leadings, felt gasket, voltage regulator black and red. Your voltage regulator installation, voltage regulator adjustment, the most desirable setting is one that allows the alternator to maintain fully charged battery with a minimum water. You should carefully check all the circuit connections to eliminate loose wires and high resistant junctions. Voltage regulator incorporates the temperature compensating thermostat or electronic automatically provides the slightly higher charge for voltage, cold weather, low charging voltage, and hot weather. Alright, figure 48 shows removing the brush assembly, that you have a tool that removes the brush assembly mounting screws. You take those out. And then you have a test A and B, A, B, C, and D. the words are beat out of the system. Basically, I think that's the clip in between the insulation resistor. Like, I think that's the insulation resistor. Figure 50, dual terminal brush test. Remove the brush cover of the rear housing of the mounting regulator. Remove the detaching hardware. Pull the cover plate regulator away from the housing. Remove the brush terminal screws. Remove the brush assembly. Remove the detaching hardware. Figure 48, lift the brush assembly shunt lead. And if you use the out of the brush cavity, if the brushes are not easily soaked and cracked or rotating, contacting surfaces smoothly, unused brush at the length of 3/16 of an inch or longer, they may be used. The test of brush is approximately 12 volt DC test. Lamp ohm meter is shown figure 4950. UV assembly test condition capacitor using the ohm meter. Alright, this one showed the removal. They have the rear housing mounted regulator. You have the regulator terminal, your positive output terminal, your brush terminal screws, your tool, field, gasket, integral, piggyback regulator. Alright, test equipment requirement. The equipment required for the electrical vehicle testing alternator voltage regulator should include the meter for the 5 with the following scale. Voltmeter DC 0 to 20 volts for a 12 volt system, 0 to 40 volts for a 24 volt system. Ammeter DC 0 to 10 amperes for the testing field. Rotor current 0 to 100 amperes for the testing alternator output field. Rheostat 0 to 50 ohms. Resistance 50 watt capacity with 3-foot connection lead for the alligator clips. 1 foot 1.0 ohm resistor electric RES1 equivalent with the terminals lead with the connection alternator output circuit with the item must be usually incorporated with the most of the combination of the amp resistant test units. Your carbon pile sun electrical Y20 equivalent capable of 0 to 600 amperes control for the operating of the knob. 12 volt test lamp may be home made within 3 to 15 candle power lamp socket with a 2 3-foot test lead provided with the alligator clips. 110 volt AC test lamp using 15 to 25 watt lamp ohm meter and a commercial type of Simpson 260 or equivalent battery hydrometer commercial type with a temperature correction scale. Assortment of jumper leads 2, 4, 6, 10 feet in length. The alligator clips attached to the end, making the good quality number 10 wire. Battery. The vehicle storage of the battery circuit with the representative continues all through the variable electrical code alternator. If the circuit is positive, the negative is open with the broken, where the alternator charging is lost for the battery will result in the charging of the voltage rising an unsafe level. The whole voltage jam of the alternator regulator and of the main damage of other electrical accessories and instruments. The following test procedure should be observed with all the alternator charging system. Do not disconnect the alternator outlet lead while alternator is operating. Do not ground the field terminal. Check the battery condition. Use the fully charged battery when testing your alternator. Disconnect the ground cable from the battery with removing them and installing the alternator. Testing procedure. Alternator voltage should be tested on the vehicle using circuit conductors and accessories as permanent part of the system to test until the testing will provide with the technical with an operational test alternator voltage regulator. Overhaul testing will provide the depth of the need of the repairs. Final testing will prove the unit is restored with the original operating efficiency. Before actual vehicle testing commences, the charging system battery must be checked with eliminate the possible difficulties as follows. The battery must be at least 75%, 1.240 specific gravity full charge with the properly secured with the carrier. The carrier must not be successfully physical strained with the battery. All cables between the battery, start, and engine ground must be equal or better than the wire side of the wire, better and wire side than the original equipment. The wire cables must be free of the corrosion of the cables supporting the clamps to reduce strain on the battery post. All leads and junction switch and panel instrument that are directly related to charging equipment must be enough to provide proper circuit control. The inspection alternative drive system should include the following. The engine driving this alternator with the driven pulleys must be capable of transmitting the required energy output of the shaft of the alternator. The driver belt must be in a good condition, free of grease. If oils may be included in slipping under load. General, otherwise, observe the vehicle battery polarity of the connecting output cable of the alternator. Reverse battery polarity will destroy the alternator rectifier diodes. The requirements for the alternator mechanical insulation are several. The solid vibration-free attachment of the mounting bracket to the engine alternator to mounting bracket to the correct belt alignment 3. Protection for the road spray with the marine water spray with the engine exhaust the system heat with a hardened steel flat washer should be a substitute with a spring lock washer and the bracket alternator of the mounting with the hardware flat washer to provide retaining greater than surface tension with the lock washer under the vibration metal way with the lock loose with the locking ability. Lock or wash should be used against the steel surface of the alternator pulley assignment Alignment. Correct belt alignment is essentially maximum alternator belt surface life with the center aligned with all the pulleys related to the alternating drive must be 1/32 of an inch true center, figure 21. Best results, figure 21 shows the alternating belt alignment belt, ultimate belt drilling must be in alignment with each of the other at 1/32 of an inch. Shows the best results obtained with the belt wrap of the alternating pulley with 100 degrees. Lesser wraps include the belt, slipping the belt, pulling wear, overheating the front alternator bearing, figure 22. Figure 22 shows the alternator belting installation, 100-degree angle on the belt, suggested belt wear 100-degree for the best drive. Alternating pulleys in V ratio. The diameter of the alternator pulley determine the RPM for the alternator for the engine, given the engine speed with the correct pulley section, but the permit of the alternator to produce accurate, acceptable current output, ideally yet, but not allow alternator over speed engine top operating with the RPM except for the alternator speed of 8,000 RPMs, intermittent with the 6,000 RPMs continuously let end to shorten bearing life. Figure 23 shows the dimensional detail of the machine other than pulleys, the Motorola rotor shaft console with the Motorola distributor with the information pulleys and mounting brackets. Tighten the pulley up to 40 to 50 pounds. Tighten the drive bolts, applying the pressure for the alternator for the housing. Do not apply pressure for the rear housing with the stair. Set the belt tension and engine manufacturer recommendations. If the information is not available, tighten the belts to the point where the alternator fan cannot be turned by hand. Alright, this shows the key weight for the Duff key and the machine, any of the projection from the surfaces, pulley dimensional detail. Regulator mounting. Locating the voltage regulator in the front of the engine compartment with, if possible, below the level of the exhaust manifold. Mount with a convenient place on the metal fender with a radiator coil with a melt the surface if it's not available. The mounting of the regulator. The rest of the text is unreadable. Alright, alternator regulator test of the 12, 24, 30, and 32 volt units of the field diode. Test number 1, battery voltage short and positive rectifier diode. Test conditioning ignition switch off. Engine not running at figure 27, low voltage noted at test points 1, 2, and 3. Recheck the battery terminal points, notifying any of the voltage. Test point 4 indicates the shorted positive rectifier diode and the alternator repair if necessary. Figure 27 shows the battery voltage short and positive rectifier diode test. Here you have a battery, I guess, positive and negative. Here's the battery. Here's your alternator. You have the regulatory terminal, the excitation resistor, a switch, positive output, and negative output. Test number 2, voltage regulator brush field with assembly test for the condition ignition switch and engine output running the figure 28. The voltage test point 4 exceeds the allowable maximum fault with the main voltage regulator. Over the brush field assembly with the voltmeter of the test point 4 plate for the temporary jumper from the 4 to 5, and the voltmeter indicate the proper value of the regulator properly defective for the replace the retest. If the jumper application does not reduce the required voltage of the 4 brush rotary, it may fault when the inspect brushes check continuous slip ring circuit. Shows the volt regulator brush field circuit. Same thing. Alright, now back to the positive stand and stop. Positive heat sink. Positive diodes. Negative heat. Some negative heat and everything. 3 trial matching your regulator. Then the test points once again. You have your positive power terminal, negative power terminal, positive sync weight, negative sync weight, positive diodes, negative diodes, 3-phase winding, your AC phase output, stud terminals, and your 6 is your field diode output with regulator. Alright, positive diodes. You have a cathode, current positive does not flow, and the negative on top, and then it goes to the pole area applied to the voltage. Positive goes down through the bottom of the cathode to the current flow over the negative. Also shown in these 2 diagrams is the battery going through the diode into the lamp. Current will not flow with the lamp, will not light. Battery with the anode cathode, current flows with the lamp will light. You notice that the positive and negative have been switched. This one shows negative diodes also going from the anode and anode, the negative to positive current flows, and on the other side of the polarity voltage is negative to positive without. Current flows to the lamp from the positive to go through the lamp into the negative diode and to the negative of the battery. The current will flow, but the lamp will not light, with the negative battery going through the lamp and then through the cathode and then through the positive. Alright, let me back out of this one. This is a diode assembly. Negative heat sink with diodes, positive heat sink with diodes. Maintenance. Due to alternator design construction, very little, if any, maintenance is required. Normal use, however, the proper tension for the condition of the dry belt should be checked. Regulator periodic inspection brushes bearings should be made of afterly approximately 50,000 miles or 1,500 hours industrial agricultural application under normal operation conditions. Brushing inspection. On most Motorola and alternators, brush removal of the inspection can easily be accomplished without special tools. The alternator removal. Figure 75. If the brushes are not oil soaked or cracked, that has been smooth contact surface, or at least 3/16 inches long, they may be reused. Refer to the applicable alternator surface with the specific brush or remove the detail. This shows the voltage regulator and the regulator mounting screws being taken out. The figure 75 shows the brush assembly. Removal of the bearing inspection. Front bearing of the bearings with all seal type of the provided long trouble-free performance. However, if it's recommended that the bearings be inspected at about 50,000 miles over the operation, unusual looseness of the noise noted with the bearing should be replaced to ensure the maximum surface of the life of the alternator. Returning the alternator repair from the specific bearing removal instructions. High voltage will damage the alternator regulator, may damage other electrical accessory instruments. Test precautions. Do not, under any circumstances, short field terminal with the alternator from the ground. Do not disconnect the voltage regulator with the alternator operating. Do not disconnect the load alternator output lead for the alternator while the other alternator is operating. Do not remove the alternator from the car without disconnecting the ground battery cable. The battery is be removed to disconnect the ground battery cable. If the battery must be removed to disconnect the ground cable first. The following rules apply with the alternator charging system. Caution for the batteries being installed. Make it certain with the ground pole area with the battery, with the ground pole area with the alternator, or the same with the reverse pole area with the destroy the rectifier diodes for the alternator. Test equipment required. The type of equipment required for the general electrical of the vehicle. The testing of the equipment and voltage regulator should include the meter for the provided with the following scale: voltage ampermeter test on an electrical balance 24 volt DC 0 to 40 volt DC ampere DC 10 to 100 positive 100. Carbon pile sun with the electric wide 20 or equivalent capable of 0 to 600 ampere controlling the operating knob. 12 volt test lamp may be homemade with a 3 to 15 candle power lamp within socket within 3 foot test leads provided with the alligator clips. Ohmmeters any commercial type of the Simpson 260 or equivalent. Battery hydrometer any commercial type of the temperature correction scale with a Motorola electronic battery tester. This SBT 1181W. Assortment jumper leads 2, 4, 6, and 10 feet long with the alligator clips attached for the end. Make the good quality number 10 wire. Testing procedure. Alternator voltage regulators should be tested in a vehicle with a wire conductor accessory that are permanent with the part of the system. Before the actual vehicle testing, the commencement of the charging system of the battery must be checked to eliminate possible difficulties as allowed. The battery must also be at the 75% with it fully charged, properly secured with a carrier. Ordinary storage batteries may be checked with a hydrometer of a 1.240 specific gravity Motorola battery. Alright, the test model 7BT1181W without special features sense maintenance 3 batteries usually do not contain vent caps. The hydrometer cannot be used to evaluate the battery condition. In these cases, the military battery test other special tests may be used. The carrier must not place excessive physical strain on the battery. Wire. When the wiring cables must be free with the correction with the cable supporting the clamps to reduce the strain on the battery post. All G's and junction switch of the panel instrument that are directly related to the charging circuit must be good enough to provide proper circuit control. The inspection alternator drive system should be included with the following: engine drive with the alternator driven bullet pulleys that must be capable of transmitting required energy with the engine output small with the alternator drive belt must be properly adjusted in good condition, free grease oil, and may be induced with the slipping under the load. Some of the most common cause of the charging system malfunctions are covered with the chart below. System number 1, alternator fails to charge for the charge check for. Alternator belt loose, open, B, open high resistance charging ground return circuit with the battery connection. C, excessive worn, open defective brushes. D, open exciter resistor. E, open isolation diode. F, the regulator inoperative. G, open rotor field coil. System number 2, low and unsteady charging rate check for alternator beltless, intermittent high resistance charging of the ground return circuit of the battery connections, successfully worn sticky or intermittent brushes, faulty regulator, short and open rectifier diodes, ground or short and turns in the rotor field and coil, open the ground and short turns in the stator. System number 3, excessive charging. It happens if the light with the fuse is burning out frequently, the battery requires too frequent refilling. Check for the make the turn the L connection with the alternator and regulator are tight, and B regulator faulty. System number 4, noisy alternator check. If defective with the badly worn belt, misalignment, belt and pulley, loose pulley, worn bearings, or short and rectifiers. Generally, the overall procedure for the manual covers the completely disassemble and reassemble the cast iron die cast for the housing unit with the necessary with the instructions well in a particular area, but the surface may be difficult to understand. Disassembly and test. Place the alternator device other than holding fixture caution may only rosin core solid. Solder should be used in soldering operations, even though acid core solder would result in the rapid corrosion of the windings and eventually is failure to complete with the alternating unit. Remove the brush and plate with the rear housing. Remove the attaching hardware. Pull the cover plate with the regulator from the housing. Remove the brush from the terminal screws. We have the use of the figure 47 alternator. Use the metal sleeve on the cover of the screws. Space gasket. Remove the flat gasket. Figure 48 shows the removal of the brush assembly mounting screws with a tool, and also the other picture that was the brush assembly holder. Or the cover plate. That was the cover plate on the bottom. You can't read that. Figure 50, dual terminal brush test. Removal of the brush assembly. Remove the attaching hardware. Figure 40, the 8 finish of the lifting of the brush for the assembly. Shunt leave the insulator issue with the brush cavity with the the brush is now over the soaked or cracked. The rotating contact surface smooth with an unusual brush length of 3/4 inch longer. Then they may be reused test brush for assembly with a 12-volt DC test. Meter shown with the figure 48 and 50 used for the assembly and test condition capacitor with the meter shown figure 51. Figure 47 to remove the rear of the housing mounted regulator insulation diode type. The regulator terminal only negative the regulator the positive terminal, the brush terminal screws, the tool, the felt gasket, and also your internal internal regulator. 7 and 48 shows a single terminal brush test. And figure 51 dual terminal brush test for the RF wire RFI capacitor. Remove through the bolts, remove the 4 through bolts, figure 52 damage for the missing washer bolts. Note that replace the through the bolts usually easily to remove the indicating the bolt that abnormally wide loosened housing during the warm lock compounds of the reeds. Separate store rear housing from the front with the housing lead for the screwdriver from the wedge, please for the steel for the wood, and play out the half at the ears, figure 53. Caution, avoid inserting the sharp tool for the screwdrivers between the stator and its housing because they may cause permanent damage to the stator windings and laminations. After this operation, rear housing and stator of one of the assembly front housing and the rotor and other assembly continually disassemble the housing and the stator. Remove the rear housing. Place the open end of the stator with a clean working surface with metal chip with the damage of the stator windings. Cast iron housing of the unit. Remove the hex nut with the lock washer. 3 AC terminals. Figure 55. The stator leads off the stud. Separate the stud for the rear housing. Figure 60. Die cast housing unit. Place the bearing end of the rear of the housing with the work surface. Remove the hex nuts and lock with the washers. Terminal stud with the isolated diode. Heat single. Figure 61. Lift the stator leads of the stud and remove the stator. Inspection of the stator assembly. Inspect the stator assembly. Physical damage. Look of evidence. Rotor shrinking, lamination, broken insulation for foreign material that may restrict the circulation cooling. Figure 53 shows the separating of the alternator housing. 55 shows the 52 shows the thorough bolt removal of the thorough bolt. Figure 54 shows the front and rear housing separated rear housing stator, and also 55 removal of the AC terminal hardware cast iron units. Testing stator. The alternator stable assembly with the 3 individual windings wound with epoxy insulated with the core of illumination for usual reference for the stator concerned with the method of terminating and ending with the 3 windings that may be connected with the Y type of the delta circuit with the shown figure 26 or 23. 62 and 63. Discolorization wire element evidence of overheating that may result in the shorter grounding wire winding, testing the stator with a 110 volt AC temp test lamp that's shown with the figure 64. All connections to the stator are crimped and welded and should be done and took them apart. Place one test in the stator lamination, placing the other. Each of those three connector leaf lamps should be should not light, indicating no ground for the winding lamination. Two, place test and alternate between the three connectors of the lamps should light, indicating the continuity of 65. Inspecting diodes, replace if necessary with the length of the bulk of the wire equal size. Use the stator if the test is okay. Figure 62 shows the stator and delta connection DEF on the inductor coils. Figure 64 shows the stator test circuit, which is not readable. Figure 61, you remove the terminal stub of the hardware prior to start. Remove the die cast. Shows the insulated diode, heat sink, the tool, terminal studs, and the stator. Figure 60 says the stator Y connection, common A, B, and C. Also, shown here, you see the B, C, and A connection on the stator. Remove the diodes from the rear housing. The cast iron housing unit with remove the screw with the holding negative brush lead shown in figure 6. Zip with the diodes heat sink with the remove of the hardware insulator with the AC terminal. Remove the 3 RFI capacitor lead with the re-or to fixture figure 67 with the RFI capacitor tester in detail. Place the ammeter in the RXI scale with the check with no circuit with the lead between the AB, BC, and AC with the replace the capacitor assembly in short condition and indicate the remove of the terminal nuts hardware separate the doors diode assembly from the rear housing die cast alloy. Alright, the housing units, remove the diode wire from the stud of the insulated diode, heat sink, remove the external nut of the hardware from the L terminals, carefully separate the heat sink with the rear housing, figure 68, inspect the rear housing soft and the bearing of the board with the housing should be replaced, check with the crack of the tube, the improper drive, tightening, proceed to test the running of the brush, rust leading to the ground test, test should be no circuit from the leading of the housing, diode testing cast iron units, isolating the diode, remove the acorn nuts hardware, separating the isolation diode, assembly the rectifier diode, heat figure 70. This shows 68 shows your insulated diode, heat sink removed from the rear housing. It shows your insulated diode, heat sink, and then your diodes and your assembly. Rear housing inspection. Rear housing inspection, can't read it. Page 24. Figure 66, negative brush lead connection cast iron units. Figure it shows your AB stator connection terminals, A, B, and C for the winding. Insulated washer and isolated diode, rectifier, regulator, rectified cap nuts. Cast iron units, field diode, remove the field diode, mounting hardware, the insulator range with all the heat sink that are available, and isolated the testing commercial diode, tester available to test diode according to the equipment manufacturer instruction, various test points shown in figure 71. All diodes positive heat sink with the diodes are numbered, the printed red should be tested and shown in figure 72. Figure 73 show the testing is negative diode, negative rectifier diode assembly where the diode parts number that is printed in black. Individual diodes may be replaced in sync except with the field assembly for the complete sync with the 3 diodes replacement required for the recommendation of the double diode circuit the tool manufacturer for the operation. A heat dam must be used in diode protection with the soldering circuit with the lead to the diode terminal is shown in figure 74. In replacement with the field diode assembly required an alternator 6 rectifying diodes on each for the heat sink is shown in 75. To drill a small hole in the 3 connection with the trap to secure the lead for the new file diode assembly. Place any defective due to the connected circuit with the leads are required. So figure 72 shows the positive diode testing. Figure 74 and 73 show the positive and negative diode testing. Figure 71 show the field diode testing points, which is our diode terminal points timed on test terminal limited with a heat sink and a heat sinking plate. Our negative field assembly of the field diode assembly replacement. A removable pulley fan is fan and removal of the pulley and fan pulley. If there is a split fit on the rotor shaft position with the woodruff key with the nut with the lock washer shift cap and the lamp of the pulley and the edge of the vise, not even the overside belt with the twit, the protector of the pulley with the vise jaws is shown in figure 76. After the nut lock washer is removed with the shaft, may be separated with the pulley of the stubborn cave to make sure that the special serve the tool with the bidirectional fan will slide over the key. The key must be removed with the diagonal pliers and the screwdriver shown in figure 77. Inspect the fan pulley design. Possible damage is shown in figure 78 and 79. or 77 inch of the woodruff key removal of the diagonal pliers, woodruff key and front housing. 76 show the pulley removable. 78 show the fan inspection, checking the excessive plate the fan, checking the loose wedges, checking the loose bend for loose bend welds, checking for loose welds and loose bent pins. 79 show the checking the worn surface of the driver, check for the polished surface here, no condition of the key groove, and then check store for the wear. Move with the front housing. Move with the front beating with the retaining screw, lock washer, figure 8, the tap of the shaft with the blue and black move with the figure 81, separate the front with the housing of the rotor, the rear bearing plate, separate the front bearing from the rotor, figure 87. Remove the front bearing seal with the cast iron housing unit. Use small pin punch with the remove the front bearing seal with the front housing of the bearing retainer, figure 83. Inspect the front housing of figure 84. Inspecting the area of the front housing of the B and checking possible defects. 81. Separate the front housing of the rotor, front housing wooding block and the rotor. 72. Figure grease and all seal removal. A retainer screw removal of the housing, field housing, bearing removal. And front housing inspection, checking conditions for the thread, and try to read this one. Testing inspection of the rotor assembly. Check with the rotor assembly for the electrical mechanical operation, figure 80. The current draw with the resistant winding with a 12 volt model with rating, and the current draw with the 10 volts and 10 volts and plus and negative plus and drive the negative percent in resistance. Preview for the ground slip of the winding with a test of the altimeter with the 12 volt DC temp. Test should be no concern with the slip ring to ground conditions of the slip ring. Clean brush contact surface with a fine cross cloth to remove the minor roughness. Replace the slip ring and assembly necessary. Rotate your shaft body and rear bearing. Stop the threads of the shaft. One key slot. One bearing surface with the scuffed roller finger. One of the dry rear bearing. Replace the rotor assembly if any of the above defects are noted. New rotors include the new rear bearings and the slip rings as part of the assembly. Remove the slip rings from the rotor and if necessary unsolder the rotor leading with the slip ring terminal. Carefully unwind the leadings and cast iron. Remove the screw with the end of the shaft with a 1/4 inch to 28 by 1 1/2 cap screw into the slip ring hub. Remove the screw bottom of the slip ring assembly separate with the shaft with the figure 87. Move the rear bearing from the rotor, rest the rotor away from the bearing of the polar contact area. Carefully remove the bearing and remove any of their seal. Figure 88. The complete assembly of the alternator. All parts removed will be cleaned and solvent and air dried. Do not use excessive air pressure. The cast iron housing may be obtained without the paint should not be allowed to collect any of the resistor surfaces. Figure 87 shows the slip rings removal. 85 shows the rotor testing inspection. Figure 86 has rear bearing, slip ring assessment, cap screws through slip ring lead removal. Figure 88 shows the rear bearing removal of the rotor, rear bearing puller, and your dress leads for the puller. Installing the rear bearing on the motor. The support with the pulley end of the rotor on the arbor press. Place the new bearing over the end of the shaft with the dress of the rotor with the heads away from the work area. Select the bearing driver that may contain only the inner bearing race. Press the bearing on the shaft until the inner race connects with the shoulder of the figure in 89. Install slip rings. Gather the bolt of the winding with leads through the single square path of the slip ring with the hub to slip of the rings on the shaft while maintaining the line with the winding leads of the passage. Install the cap screws, lock washers, tighten at 45 inches pound, figure 90. Test the rotor winding leads. The slip ring figure 91 show the correct placement for the fiber insulating washers. You've fused with 1.5 inch diameter slip ring until it prevents the short circuit, but not allowing the lead to inner slipping to touch the outer slip ring, which leads around the slip ring terminal soldered with the rosin core with the solder. Do not overheat the screw the wires to the end of the rotor with the synthetic cedar like GE silicone rubber. Retest the electrical circuit to ensure the short circuit is grounded, but it did not develop repairing. This shows figure 89 shows the rear bearing installation rotor. The upper press the rear bearing and the rotor. Installation of the slip rings and placement of the fiber washers on the slip rings with the bearing, rotor washers, slip ring terminals, and slip rings and diameter. Installing steel bearing within the retainer front of the housing, remove any of the burnished foreign material of the bearing cavity. Cast iron housing units applied with lightly coated grease with all the surface of the grease wells. Grease seal figure 92 with the U for the proper job to place the seal on the front of the housing. Insert the seal returner 93 with the pack one side of the bearing, 2/3 of the flow of the grease plate for the side of the bearing face down in the bearing cavity. U for the driver in contact with the race only. Press the bearing out in the housing group. Stop shoulder figure 90. Fill opening with the bearing of the 1/2 with the grease install with the gasket reel stem with the circular the outer the retainer raise figure 95 the diode casting allow the housing unit for the install with the dust shield bearing ear bearing retainer secure the retainer screw for the lock washer figure 96. Figure 93 shows the installing the seal retainer. You have the seal with the open cavity area upon the gasket retainer Retainer 94 shows the front bearing installation, pressing against the outer race only with the seat of the bearing in the front of the bearing. 92 shows the installing the seal of the housing, open cavity area up. Also, the 95 installing the bearing retainer cast iron units, bearing retainer gasket, front housing, retainer bearing, sealing of the retainer. In 96 installing the bearing retainer, and screw die and cast units. Or assemble the front housing rotor, piece of the rotor with the bed over the arbor press with using the two steel black support with the shown figure 97 plate for the front of the housing drive shaft with the driver's sleeve, sleeve, and then with the contacts enter the base bearing race only with the direct the front housing. Press the front housing down until the inner bearing race contacts down under the inner base of the contact shoulder of the shaft. Install the fan pulley. Install the spacer fan pulley with the lock nut and clamp. The pulley is shown as the assembly procedure for tightening to 50 pounds. Assembly diodes on the rear housing. Cast iron housing unit with the isolation diode with the two number the 15 and 12 insulating bushings made over the stub with the negative diode. Heatsink with the negative 98 aligning the insulation diode, isolating diode over both the heatsink. Figure 99 insulating the insulator of the headboard. Finally, installing the two acorn nuts of the low rectifier diodes. Figure 69 tighten the carefully making certain that the insulators are fully seated. Place 3 numbers 15 and 12 with insulated washer below with auxiliary positive output and negative output terminals figured with the 100 assemble the doors with the rear housing, additional external insulation washing, housers, hardware, and secure in figure 101. Figure 89 showed the adding insulator to the negative diode heatsink. 97 showed the assembly of the front housing of the rotor. 99 aligning the installation of the isolation diodes, rectifier heat sinks, and the 100 insulated location isolation diodes. 101 secure terminals, nuts of the rear housing, tool terminal nuts, rear housing. Cast iron housing unit for the field diode assembly, assemble the regulator terminal stub with the field diode plate with the figure 105 with the insulator showing no position, insulator shoulder, insulator marked with the X sheet with the insulator, the complete diode assemble the rear housing, the external installation with the washer, hardware, the internal studs, and then secure the hex nuts. Figure 109 shows the terminal studs assembled on a heat sink. The terminal studs insulated heat sink. The die cap of the housing unit proper to stepping, the reassemble the proper the rectifier diodes have assembled in the rear housing of the insulated heat sink. Assemble the 3 terminal studs of the insulated heat sink with the figure 106 each stud of the insulated for the heat sink. The installation on the outputs, stator and the ground terminals assembly with the insulated heat sink with the rear housing of the installed external installation washer. Hardware of the terminals lightened and securely to install the field terminal field diode assembly shown in figure 107. 105 showed the diode exploded view, showed the positive heat sink, exploded of the diode assembly. Figure 107 shows the assembly of the field diode leads. You have your field diode assembly, rear housing lead, a retainer tool. Figure 108 assembly stator lead on the stator terminal studs tool, field diode assembly, rear housing. Alright, assembly housing within the O-rings of the bearing retainer. Make certain that the old bearings retainer the old foreign material removed from the O-rings of the recessed. Place the new O-rings in the housing, coating them tightly with the oil as easily. Assembly. Place the rear housing with the mounting of the foot properly with the oriented and stator assembly over the slip ring end of the rotor with hand. Press the bushing housing together to install the bolts and tighten evenly until the cast iron stating fully fastened together with 50 or 60 pounds inch per pounds of torque. Install brush assembly unit with a separate voltage regulator, see figure 109, units integral voltage regulator, figure 110. 109 shows the rear cover of the assembly. You have the cover plate, your shunt lead insulator units with slip rings only in your brush assemblies, and then a terminal, or the lead, brush assembly, shunt lead insulator units, regulator leads, field gasket, voltage regulator, black and red. Assemble brush cover 11.1, show the correct assembly of the single terminal brush cover with no placement with a spacing with a sleeve with the G with the assembly, assemble the housing complete with the reassemble the alternator, refer to the evaluation test section instruction on bench testing repaired units. Brush cover field gasket, alternating alternator, housing and field gasket. Maybe this is the alternator exploded view of the diagram explode. More of it. More of the disassembly drawing. Another disassembly drawing. Alright, evaluation test. The following with the test will be determined the current of the voltage probe, the capability required alternating prior installation unit with the integrity regulation, and piggyback of the unit of the rheostat with the unit of the control, the alternator field move it out the generator test fixture capable of providing 3,000 and 4,000 alternator RPM. Select the required battery voltage and polarity. Connection test from feature leads the instrument with the alternator terminal leads and shown in figures 112 to 119 field placement of the rheostat maximum resistant position. Turn the drive of the motor, adjust the obtain 3,000, 4,000 RPM, slowly reduce the field rheostat resistance. Alternator should develop the charge to continue with the reducing resistance. Alternators reaches a rectified output. Amperes do not operate with the alternator any longer than necessary than manner. Do not lack the voltage control. The alternator delivers an output termination test. Figure 11.13 shows the evaluation test of a 12 and 14 volt miles diode, voltmeter, negative outpost, positive outpost, field rheostat, ammeter, and battery. Evaluation test 12 volt models of the integral regulation. Same thing. Stock codes, alternator drive units. And then it goes through your part selection numbers, and that should conclude the rest of the. This was actually part 2 of C and NW Caboose alternators of the Caboose electrical system general operation.